Hutchinson All Access. I'm Ron Sylvester, editor of the Hutchinson News, and with me today is Daniel Friesen, mayor of Buhler, Kansas. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So you had a pretty big issue come up at your last city council meeting, whether or not you were going to rezone to build a Dollar General. Now, you drive all across Kansas, every small town you come to, you see a Dollar General, but apparently that's not going to happen in Buhler, Kansas. Can you just tell us about what happened the other night?
Sure. Well, it was a long process. It started end of last year. Dollar General approached the city about applying for a zoning change to the south part of Buhler. It's actually in what's called an extraterritorial zone, which is outside the city limits but within our zoning regulations. And so we started that process, started out as a zoning and planning hearing, and so we did that, actually had 2 different sessions to make sure we had complete and full comment from the public on it. There was a lot of comments in both directions. A lot that were for it, a lot that were against it. They ended up voting 4-3 to approve it.
The Planning Commission.
The Planning Commission did. And so they came back, delivered that to City Council, and we had our meeting on Tuesday. And so Tuesday, we did another public comment period, which is a little unusual to have yet another public comment period, and we opened that up again, heard probably a majority, I'd say 3 out of the 11 were against, so the majority were for. I'm sorry, the opposite of that. About 3 were for, 2 of them were the applicant owners, and the rest were against. And so we started to see
against allowing the Dollar General.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so obviously there'd been a lot of input time for the council members. We heard from Kansas State University there too. We asked them to come in as a professional advisor and provide some information for the council on the status of rural communities and what specifically they have a grocery store initiative there at K-State for rural communities and ensuring that grocery stores remain in a small community. They think it's kind of a key factor in the vibrancy and sustainability of a small local town like Buhler. And so they reported that the #1 issue that rural grocery stores are facing and that are causing them to close right now is the infiltration of Dollar General.
It used to be, when they started this, it was Walmart,
yeah.
And they said now it's gone to Dollar General as being the business that moves in, that
Right.
kind of puts the mom and pops out of business.
And so, that's a factor in our decision-making process, but it's not really the primary issue. I mean, we are very cognizant of that issue of sustaining a grocery store as an important part of our local community. But the other factors, and so what we also heard in that meeting, in our previous meetings, was an issue of incompatibility. Every neighboring property owner that provided comment to us said they did not want the Dollar General in that location. And it wasn't, for them, it wasn't an issue of competition. It was an issue of just wasn't compatible with the area. It was an aesthetic issue. Gateway to the community is right there. And for the nursing home, Sunshine Meadows is right there adjacent to the proposed development. So for the nursing home, this was an issue of security, aesthetics, and I went and visited with the residents there. Didn't have a single person there that was for it, and they have over 100 residents there. And so that for me was a huge part in my recommendation to the council on what to do was, I weigh heavily the impact to those closest in that decision. And so when you have a large concentration of community residents that are against the proposal, that to me was a primary factor in suggesting that we should deny the application. So we went through the whole process. We have 5 council members and myself. I actually don't vote unless there's a tie. And so we deliberated, and every council member talked, which is a little unusual, and that was good. And they all voiced similar opinions. They're concerned for the residents that were close and that were opposed. They were, as kind of a secondary factor, concerned for potential harm to the economic factors of a local grocery store and stuff like that. And they were responding to those that came and talked to them, and almost every one of them said the majority of people that have come and talked to me are not supportive of this request. And so at the end of the day, we voted, like you said, 5-0 to deny the request. And not sure where it'll go from there. They've got 30 days to object, but haven't heard anything yet. But that's where we're at.
Well, and here at the Hutchinson News, we've done stories really across western Kansas and central Kansas about small towns that have either lost their grocery store or have or it's been threatened to close. Some towns have been able to save them. And what do you think it is about having the local grocery store that's so vibrant to a small community?
Well, K-State talked a lot about it, and I can't redigest everything off the top of my head, but a lot of it applies to not just a grocery store, but local ownership. And so what you typically find in a smaller community is you find local ownership, and with that you kind of have a cycle of local investment. Any business pays taxes, and those go back to the city, but local businesses, their owners live here, so they have tax base at home. They do a lot with donations, supporting local charities, local fundraisers. You see grocery stores at the forefront of providing water or for like an athletic event or sponsorship, or sponsoring a new scoreboard, for instance, in our community. So you see a lot of that reinvestment in the money that's put in to that local business gets reinvested locally. And so that was the biggest thing I took away from K-State's comments, and the fact, they give a lot of data. One of them, they said a town our size, the economic loss, if you measure it, was about $750,000 if you lose a grocery store like that. And so, again, not the only factor, and the applicant, argued that shouldn't be a factor at all, how they're going to use or who goes in there. But to us, it had to be a factor. One of our decision points in our decision matrix was welfare to the community. And so when you have someone like K-State coming in and say, hey, if what happened in Haven happens here, you could lose $750,000 to your local economy, you could lose the money getting funneled to, community events and so forth. That was a factor in the process.
And having Haven right next door,
Yeah.
which had made the opposite decision, and you could kind of see what happened with that community. Was that helpful to you?
It was. I mean, it was definitely something that was brought up, the Haven grocery store owner was there to comment on. I mean, he attributed much of his sales downturn to the opening of the Dollar General. And so again, the city's not in business to protect private commerce. That's not what we're there to do. But we are there to protect the citizens, and what we can do to keep the economy stable is in that vein.
Yeah, and Buhler has really on your main street built kind of a vibrant local merchant area there. I mean, it's become like, for people who live in this area, people who live in Hutchinson and the surrounding area. I mean, that becomes almost like a destination.
Yeah.
You like to go down and hang out in Buhler and go to the grocery store or Adrian's or a lot of that, and in some ways. This could be a move to preserve that a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, that again, we're not here to stop any business. I'd say, if anything, Buhler's pro-business. If you look at Buhler's track record, we have an unusual amount of entrepreneurs that are doing all kinds of things across the whole spectrum, and we do have a number of businesses focused on the destination idea, and we want to keep that up. Dollar General didn't really fit any of those. It doesn't mean that that's why it got denied, but I think that's a big reason why many in the community didn't want it, is because it just didn't fit with who we are as a town. And I mean, I think the community likes a little bit of distance from kind of the heavy retail kind of big box stores, and we take advantage of the fact that you can live in a small town like Buhler and have a really great town like Hutchinson 15 minutes away, where you can get anything and everything you want. And so I think that's an important part of what Buhler is, and that's why people live there.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us and giving us some more insight into what into the decision that you made last week, and we really appreciate it. Thanks to Daniel Friesen, Mayor of Buhler.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it.